Before I introduce you to the story, I must first give you an introduction of who I am and what happened, and exactly when what occurred. My name is Jeff Anderson. The current date is December 5th, 2011, and the time is 7:49 p.m. The events I am about to tell you are very true and are not for the weak of heart. The date was September 18th, 2005. I remember it as clear as day. I was sitting in my car, listening to some Led Zeppelin. It was a casual day, no rain, peaceful. I had come across one of those radio advertisements you'd hear once in a while. This one was talking about my local GameStop having a sale on used video games. This was interesting to me because I wanted to break out my old Game Boy Color and see if it still worked. I was also curious to see if they had any Pokemon games. I had made my way to GameStop, leaving just before work, of course. I entered the store, looked around for one of the helpers. A tall, dark-haired man came out of the back with a case of old PlayStation 2 games. I smiled towards him and asked, "Do you have any old Pokemon games laying around in the back there?" He smiled towards me for a moment and said, "Yeah, we've got a few old ones. Anyone specific?" I shook my head. "No, just any." He left to the back once again, coming back out with a case of Game Boy Advance games along with some Game Boy Color games. I peered towards the case, the side being labeled Pokemon. I had reached inside the case and pulled 3 cartridges out, not even paying attention to the names of the games. I checked out and headed off to work, working in the office for half the day. I had returned out to my car, going into the driver's seat and looking over towards the game cartridges I loved laying. Finally got a good look at the games. One was Pokemon Yellow, the other was Pokemon Silver, and last there was Pokemon Red. There was something unique about each of the cartridges, though. These cartridges each were miscolored. You know how Pokemon Yellow's cartridge was supposed to be yellow, right? Well, this one wasn't yellow, it was red. That seemed to catch my eye the most. I picked up the cartridge and slid it in my pocket, leaving the others in the seat next to me. I made my way home and entered my house, looking around for my Game Boy Color. I finally found my Game Boy Color, wiping some dust off it and blowing the cartridge holder out for a moment, inserting the cartridge and starting my Game Boy up. I was amazed that it still worked. The game started out normal, the Game Freak logo coming up normally. There was something odd. It froze on the Game Freak logo for a moment, then skipped straight to the Pokemon Yellow screen. Pikachu was on the screen as he was supposed to be, and I pushed the A button and went to the new game option. Oddly, it didn't let me select a new game. Instead, it started someone else's save game. I started outside of the character's house. I pushed the select button and scrolled to the character's stats. The person had named the character Death, which really didn't interest me much. I scrolled over the badges, and he had no badges, one whatsoever. Yet when I entered the Pokemon section, the only Pokemon I could see was Pikachu. He had no others. I ignored this and continued to play, traveling to Oak's lab. This is where it really begins to get strange. When I entered Oak's lab, the screen began to discolor, being only blacks and whites. The sprites within the game were also changing. Some seemed to be attached to the walls, with what appeared to be blood underneath them. When I finally got to Professor Oak, his sprite had no eyes at all, just a nose, hair, and a mouth. This was a bit odd to me. Was this a hacked cartridge? I continued to play, beginning to speak with Oak. Oak's speech towards the character was odd. He spoke, "No one understands our pain. Only the ones who understand our pain are the ones who have died due to its wrath." By now I was a bit freaked out, hesitating whether to play anymore or not. Yet again, I continued, leaving Oak's lab and heading back to the character's house. I entered the house and the game began to get even weirder. The sprite of the character was now solid black with only a white outline. The entire house was red, and the character's mother wasn't even in the house. I was stunned, and I moved toward the television, pressing A once again. The television's dialogue was odd, being almost like Professor Oak's. "Pain is coming. Let the sky rip open and let the blood of 1,000 sinners rain down upon this unholy land." I had decided to shut the game off by this point, but when I pushed the button to shut off the Game Boy, nothing happened. The game remained playing, displaying a new image. You thought you could just end the game with that? You thought you could stop his wrath? His wrath has yet to begin. The blood will shed. I pulled the cartridge out of the Game Boy suddenly, the Game Boy screen fading into white. I finally got the game to stop. I placed the cartridge down beside the Game Boy and headed upstairs to my bedroom to sleep. I woke the next morning, heading downstairs. I looked at my Game Boy Color, deciding to try and play Pokemon Yellow again. Maybe this time it would be normal. Maybe the game would be acting normal. I turned the game on. Instead of the Game Freak logo being displayed, the game cut right onto the character sprite in bed. The sprite moved out of the bed on its own and approached the television by himself, and a dialogue started. Rain, rain, go away, coming again another day. Ah ha 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 ha. I gained control back over the character, moving him down the stairs. I left the house, and when I stepped out, I was in horror. The sprites that usually roamed around were laying on the ground, with what appeared to be blood on them. It was also raining within the game, which I took as the starting dialogue from that television scene. I slowly began to move my sprite again. Then the screen began to change. The screen began to distort, which was odd to me. It was spiraling to the center whenever I moved my sprite, which was very scary for me, especially the music that was playing. The music was something I'd never heard before at all. It was a horrible tone. It was a high-pitched squealing noise that would fade out for a moment and then suddenly come back even louder. I continued to move my sprite, not even able to figure out where I was headed due to the distortion of the screen. Finally, the screen faded completely back, a white text appearing. It appears that he has arisen, bone by bone, broken down from the souls of the tortured. He has returned. After that text, the screen lightened up slowly, showing my sprite in what appeared to be a cave. I was terribly frightened at this point, honestly wanting to throw the Game Boy away and forget the whole incident. But something wouldn't let me. The eagerness to figure out who this he was, I suppose. I noticed now that my Pikachu was out, following me as I moved down the cave. The screen gradually getting darker as I moved down. I finally reached a point where the screen was completely black. The music was gone. I moved once more, suddenly hearing a horrid, high-pitched squealing from my speakers on the Game Boy. The screen immediately cut to a battle scene. My character was standing there as the opponent was nothing. Nobody was on the other side. My sprite didn't even make the motion of sending Pikachu out. Suddenly it showed a horrible text. Pikachu has died. My eyes widened at this, with only my sprite being on the screen, and then the next text was even more horrid. Jeff has blacked out. Jeff? I remember the character's name being Death. How on earth had this have happened? I never put my name in the game. What on earth was going on? The screen faded black once more, coming back to reveal my character sprite in a room with bodies laying all over. My sprite appeared to be chained to a wall, and finally the text came up. He has finally come, unleashing the torture he has suffered on those who have taunted him. And then the screen cut to the game over image, with a loud, high-pitched squealing playing before the game shut itself off. A few months passed after that, and I have gotten rid of my Game Boy Color and gotten rid of all the remaining Pokemon games. I haven't told anyone about the story till now, and I hope one thing. If anyone ever did buy that cartridge of Pokemon Yellow, I hope they got rid of it as soon as they could. This is the story of Pokemon Forgotten Yellow.